The moment my wealthy son told me to stop acting like I owned anything, he had no idea I still held the keys to $8 million he had carelessly forgotten on paper. That was not just money. It was my youth, and the years I was erased from his life. The night he screamed at me in his suburban mansion, I realized I would be the one walking away with everything that truly belonged to me. My name is Martha Ellison. The sun was barely up over Lakeview Heights, painting the manicured lawns in a shade of aggressive green that only money could buy. I woke up in the downstairs guest suite of my son's 7-bedroom villa. They called it a suite. I called it what it was, a holding cell for an unwanted relic. My back ached from the mattress that was too soft, a stark contrast to the firm, reliable bed I had left behind in the city. I walked into the kitchen. The smell of expensive roasted coffee beans hung in the air, sterile and sharp. My son, Lucas, sat at the head of the marble island. His wife, Brooke, was on his right. My granddaughter, Emma, sat opposite them, her face illuminated by the blue light of a tablet. No one looked up when I entered. I was a ghost in a floral housecoat. I moved to the coffee pot and poured myself a cup. The china clinked against the granite counter. The sound was deafening in the silence. Brooke sighed. She did not look up from her phone. Her fingers tapped furiously on the glass screen. Lucas. Did you speak to her about the smell? Brooke asked. Her voice was thin and sharp like a paper cut. I froze with the mug halfway to my lips. Lucas cleared his throat. He did not look at me either. He stared at his laptop screen where graphs of the stock market flashed in red and green. Brooke means the ointment. Mom, Lucas said. His voice was tight. It lingers in the hallway. Maybe keep your door closed. It is for my arthritis, I said. My voice sounded rusty. Brooke finally looked up. Her eyes swept over me with a look of pure exhaustion. It smells like a nursing home. And your knitting basket is on the credenza again. We have guests coming tonight. It looks messy. I will move it, I said. It is not just the basket. Martha, Brooke snapped. She dropped her phone on the counter. It is the space. We have zero privacy. We are trying to build a life here, and it feels like we are running a charity ward. I looked at Lucas. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to say that I raised him single-handedly. I waited for him to remind her that I sold my car to pay for his first semester of college. Lucas closed his laptop. He clasped his hands together. Mom, Brooke has a point. We need to establish some healthy boundaries. You living here was supposed to be temporary. You need to focus on your financial independence. We cannot carry you forever. The word carry hit me hard. Before I could respond, Brooke slid a thick stack of papers across the island. The paper made a dry hissing sound against the stone. Since we are discussing this, Brooke said, her tone shifting to a fake sweetness that was far more dangerous than her anger. Lucas and I simplified things. This is just a standard update for the family trust. It consolidates everything under Lucas's management. It is just for tax efficiency. Sign the last page. I looked down. At the top of the page, bold navy letters screamed, Horizon Gate Capital. That was Lucas's firm, the firm that was supposedly doing so well. Yet Lucas had dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My instincts, sharpened by 30 years of managing tenants and leaky roofs, flared up. I need to read it first, I said. Brooke laughed. It was a cold, short sound. Read it, it is legal jargon. Martha, You would not understand half of it. It just says Lucas handles the assets. It is for your own good. Why are you always so difficult? I am not signing what I do not understand, I said firmly. I pushed the papers back. Brooke slammed her hand on the counter. Emma jumped. Oh my God. Lucas. She is doing it again. She is clinging to power she does not even have. She is broke. She is living off our charity, and she still wants to control us. Lucas stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. His face was flushed red. The stress of the pending merger, the failing numbers he thought he hid so well, it all boiled over. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Enough, Lucas shouted. Just sign the damn papers. Mom, you have to stop acting like you own anything in this life. The kitchen went dead silent. The refrigerator hummed. Emma looked up from her tablet, her eyes wide and fearful. She looked from her father to me. I looked at my son, the boy I had held when he scraped his knees, the man who just told me I was nothing but a beggar in his house. He was breathing hard. He did not take it back. He did not apologize. He meant it. I did not scream. I did not cry. A strange, cold calm settled over me. It was the same calm I felt when Jack died. It was the calm of survival. I see, I said softly. I did not touch the papers. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the cold coffee. I walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway to my room. Lucas thought I owned nothing. He thought I was a senile old woman clutching at straws. He had forgotten. He had been so busy building his empire on sand that he forgot about the bedrock. As I closed the door to my room, a single image flashed in my mind. It was a yellowing file folder sitting in a fireproof box at the bottom of my closet. On the cover, typed in ink that had not faded in 15 years, were the words, Redwood Place Holdings, LLC, Managing Member, Martha J. Ellison. He wanted me to stop acting like I owned anything. Fine. I would stop acting. I would start collecting. I closed the door to the guest suite and sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the big house pressing against my ears. To escape the cold humiliation of the kitchen, I let my mind drift back 15 years, to a time when our hands were rougher, but our hearts were warmer. We were living in Briarwood then, a grimy industrial town where the smoke from the factories turned the sunsets a bruised purple. I was 48 years old, and my husband, Jack, was still alive, driving his 18-wheeler across the interstate highways to keep food on our table. Then came the knock on the door at 3 a.m, a state trooper with his hat in his hand. Jack was gone. A slick patch of black ice on I-80 had taken him, leaving me with a modest life insurance check, a half-paid mortgage, and a silence in the house so loud it hurt my teeth. Lucas was 23 then. He had just graduated and was working as a junior data analyst at a small firm called Northline Dynamics. He did not have the designer suits or the Tesla back then. He lived in a shoebox apartment with a leaking radiator, but every single evening he would drive his beat-up Honda Civic over to my house. He would sit at my kitchen table, holding my hand while I cried into my tea. "We are going to be okay, Mum," he would say, his voice shaking just a little. "I promise. I will take care of you." He meant it then. I knew he did. We had to make a choice. The insurance money was not enough to retire on, but it was enough to start something. Jack used to tell me, "Martha, stocks crash and jobs leave, but land and house, they don't lie." So, I made a decision that made my neighbors whisper that grief had made me crazy. I sold Jack's beloved truck. I emptied my small savings account. And I put a down payment on a rundown, 8-unit apartment building in the decaying center of town. It was called Redwood Place. The bank officer, a man with thin glasses, looked at Lucas's credit history and shook his head. He has no history. Mrs. Ellison, the banker said. We cannot put the loan on him. You have the equity. You have the credit. You have to be the primary borrower. So I signed. Lucas signed as a co-signer, just to build his credit score. We walked out of that bank feeling like we had conquered the world. This is it. Mom, Lucas said, his eyes shining as we stood in front of the peeling brick facade of the building. This is our legacy. For me. And for your future grandkids. We did not hire contractors because we could not afford them. For the next 2 years. It was just the two of us. I worked the night shift stocking shelves at the local supermarket to pay for materials. And during the day, I was at Redwood Place. I learned to spackle drywall. I learned to fix a running toilet. Lucas would come straight from his office, loosen his tie, and roll up his sleeves to help me paint walls until midnight. I remember one specific humid July night. We were sitting on the concrete front steps, sharing a greasy pepperoni pizza from the shop on the corner. Our clothes were splattered with white paint. My back ached, and my hands were blistered. But I felt happy. Lucas took a bite of pizza and looked out at the streetlights flickering on. One day, Mom, I am going to have my own firm, he said, gesturing with a crust. I won't be analysing other people's money forever. I'm going to build an empire. I know you will, I said, wiping a smudge of dirt from his cheek. I just want you to use your brain. Lucas, I don't want you breaking your body like your dad did. That is why we are doing this. When the building finally started generating a steady rent, we went to a family lawyer to formalize the business. I insisted on doing it right. I had seen too many of Jack's friends lose everything to bad handshakes. We need an LLC, I told Lucas. Redwood Place Holdings. And everything has to be in writing. I don't want you to ever get cheated. The lawyer drafted the operating agreement. It listed me, Martha J. Ellison, as the managing member. Lucas nodded along, happy just to see the business growing. Whatever you say. Mom, he said, signing the secondary line. You are the boss. I'm just the silent partner. Those were the best years. We were partners. He called me every single morning on his way to work. On Sundays. He drove me to church. And afterward, we would walk through the farmer's market, picking out tomatoes and laughing about nothing. I thought we were invincible. I thought there was no force on earth that could come between a mother and the son she built a world for. I did not know then that the seeds of my own Iraja were already being planted, watered by the very success I was helping him build. The shift did not happen overnight. It began the evening Lucas brought Brooke home to Redwood Place. She was a marketing executive for a fast fashion brand, a woman who spoke in buzzwords and wore beige cashmere that looked too expensive to touch. They had met at a financial networking mixer in the city. When she walked into my living room, she scanned the space like she was appraising a property for demolition. Oh, Martha. You look so much younger than Lucas described, Brooke exclaimed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She ran a manicured hand over the old oak dining table Jack had refinished. And this building, it has such potential. If you just gutted the interiors and redid the branding, You could attract a totally different demographic. I smiled, feeling a sudden, inexplicable shame about my cozy, cluttered home. Well, we like it here. It has history. Later that night, while I was cutting a pie in the pantry, I heard their hushed voices drifting from the kitchen. Babe, she is sweet, but she is a lot, Brooke whispered. She is just so enmeshed with you. You have to set some boundaries if you want your career to really take off. You cannot carry her emotional baggage forever. I stood frozen, the knife hovering over the apple pie. That was the first time I heard the word boundaries used as a weapon. Over the next few months, Lucas changed. He started using phrases that sounded like they came from a textbook. When I asked him to come over for Sunday dinner, he sighed into the phone. Mom, I need to prioritize my own mental space this weekend, he said, his voice distant. I cannot be your primary emotional support system anymore. It is draining. Brooke began her campaign to modernize me. She came over on weekends not to visit, but to edit. She walked through the halls of Redwood Place, pointing at the photos of Jack and the fishing trophies on the wall. These are just cluttering your energy. Martha, she said, taking down a picture of Jack standing by his truck. We should aim for minimalism. Let the space breathe. You are holding onto the past, and it is manifesting as stagnation. Whenever I tried to talk to Lucas about his long work hours or the mounting debt he was taking on to keep up with Brooke's lifestyle, Brooke would intervene. She would smile that tight, pitying smile. Martha, you are projecting your scarcity mindset onto Lucas. She would say, he is an abundance generator. You trying to control his finances is a form of financial trauma response. You should really look into that. I later found out she was telling a different story to her family. I saw a notification pop up on Lucas's iPad one day, a message from a group chat named The Inner Circle. Brooke had written, dealt with the hovering mother-in-law again today. The toxicity is real. Need wine ASAP. Eventually, they moved out of the city to Lakeview Heights. They bought a sprawling house with a 3-car garage and a lawn that looked like AstroTurf. I remained at Redwood Place. My visits to their new home were strictly regulated. I had to call 3 days in advance. I was told what to bring and what not to bring. No gluten, no sugar, and absolutely no dairy. Mom. Lucas instructed me before Thanksgiving. Brooke is very sensitive to inflammatory foods right now. I watched from a distance as Brooke curated their life on social media. She posted long, vague stories on Instagram about breaking generational cycles and healing from toxic family dynamics. She never named me, but every post felt like a public indictment. Friends would call me, asking if everything was okay between Lucas and me, and I would have to lie and say we were fine. The distance grew so wide, I could no longer bridge it. Every time I tried to bring up the business, to ask about the profit sharing from Redwood Place or the future of the LLC, Lucas would shut me down with a patronizing pat on the shoulder. Mom, please, he would say, checking his watch. I have experts handling the portfolio now. You do not need to stress your head with the numbers. Just relax. Honestly, it is better if you just live your life as if you do not own anything. Let me carry the burden. It is for your own peace of mind. But it is our company. Lucas, I said once, my voice trembling. It is complicated. Mom? He snapped, then softened his tone instantly. Just trust the process. You are retired. Be retired. Stop acting like a manager and start acting like a grandma. He wanted me to be invisible. He wanted the asset without the owner. And for a long time, I let him believe he had succeeded. The wedding took place at a sprawling coastal resort that smelled of salt spray and old money. I sat at the mother of the groom table, smoothing the heavy linen tablecloths that I had paid for. $5,000 for imported fabric because Brooke said the hotel standard was too pedestrian. When Lucas took the microphone for his speech, he thanked his college mentor, his business partners, and, of course, Brooke for being his anchor. He did not say a word about the woman who sold her husband's truck to buy his first suit. I clapped until my palms stung, smiling through the humiliation. 2 weeks later, Lucas came to me with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. He sat on my worn velvet sofa, his face serious. "Mom, with the market being so volatile, we need to execute an asset protection agreement," he said, sliding the papers toward me. "I am launching a new fund, and if I list Redwood Place as part of the collateral package, it strengthens my position. It is just on paper. We stand together, so you have nothing to worry about." The next day, a young lawyer from Horizon Gate Capital arrived at my apartment. He was barely 30, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He spoke at a speed that made my head spin, tapping his pen against the signature lines. "So, Mrs. Ellison, this effectively converts your interest into a limited partner position for tax optimization," he said, flipping pages rapidly. "We are structuring a call option for the principal entity, which simplifies the managing member status for the bank. Standard procedure." I felt small. I felt stupid. I just wanted to help my son. But I still own it. Right, I mean, I am still the manager. It is all in the structure. "Ma'am," the lawyer said, not meeting my eyes, "just sign here. Here. And here." I signed. I signed because I trusted the boy I raised. But as the lawyer packed up his briefcase, a deep, ancient instinct kicked in. I did not hand over the battered binder that sat on the shelf behind me. It contained the original operating agreement of Redwood Place Holdings, the one that explicitly stated I was the sole managing member and that no transfer was valid without my written consent. I left it right where it was, buried under a stack of knitting magazines. Then the silence began. Every time I asked to see Emma, there was an excuse. She had piano lessons. She had tennis camp. She was feeling under the weather. Emma gets overstimulated when she is around you. "Martha," Brooke told me over the phone one afternoon, "your energy is very heavy. It is negative. We are trying to raise her in a high-vibration environment." I was pushed out of Thanksgiving. Then Christmas. The final blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. Lucas and Brooke pulled up to Redwood Place in his black Tesla. They did not come alone. A different lawyer was with them, a woman with a face like stone. They sat at my kitchen table, refusing the tea I offered. "Mom, we need to have a hard conversation," Lucas said. He could not look at me. He looked at the window. "Our relationship has become toxic. You are not respecting our boundaries." The lawyer placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "This is an official notice. Mrs. Ellison. My clients are requesting a period of no contact. If you continue to attempt to circumvent their wishes, we will be forced to explore legal remedies." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Legal remedies, Lucas. I am your mother." Brooke placed a hand on Lucas's arm, a gesture of ownership. "We are not heartless. Martha, we will send you a monthly allowance, $2,000. It is generous. But financially, you need to accept that your time has passed. Let Lucas handle the assets. You just exist. They left me sitting there in the darkening kitchen. Within weeks, I noticed the change. My sister called me, her voice cool, advising me to seek therapy for my attachment issues. My cousins stopped inviting me to barbecues. They had all heard the story of the clinging, abusive widow who was dragging her successful son down. Then the letter arrived. It was on heavy bond paper with the letterhead of a prestigious law firm. It was addressed to me, but the bill had undoubtedly gone to Lucas. Cease and desist. Allegation of harassment and pattern of intrusive behavior. I sat alone in my apartment, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper. My son, the boy I had carried, the boy I had built a future for with my own sweat, was threatening to sue me for calling him. He had expelled me from his life not with a hug, but with a legal threat. I looked at the walls of the home I had bought with Jack's life insurance money, and for the first time, I felt truly homeless. After that letter, I shrank. I moved into the smallest unit on the ground floor of Redwood Place, a studio apartment that smelled faintly of damp wool and loneliness. I rented out my old 2-bedroom apartment to keep the cash flow positive, and I learned to live in the dark. I kept the lights off until it was absolutely necessary. My diet became a rotation of instant ramen and canned tomato soup. I waited for the monthly allowance Brooke had promised with such venomous charity. It never came. Not 1 cent. Every email I sent to Lucas was answered by a faceless assistant named Jessica, who informed me that Mr. Ellison was travelling and would address my concerns in due course. I was rotting away, convinced I was the burden they said I was. Until the pipe burst. It was 2 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday. Carla, the ICU nurse who lived in 3B, pounded on my door. Mrs. Ellison. There is water coming through my ceiling fan. I tried the emergency line for the management company, but it just rings and rings. The fog of depression lifted instantly, replaced by the sharp adrenaline of a crisis. I grabbed my master keys and my heavy flashlight. Get the buckets. Carla, I said. I ran to the basement to shut off the main valve, then hauled the old aluminum ladder out of the storage locker. My knees popped and my back screamed, but I climbed up to the roof access hatch. The wind whipped my hair across my face as I found the blockage in the drainage pipe that had caused the backup. I cleared it with my bare hands, shivering in the cold, feeling more alive than I had in months. When the plumber finally arrived, a man I called from my old Rolodex, not Lucas's list. I was already down, drying my hands on a rag. Carla made me tea in her kitchen at 4 a.m. Thank God you are here. Martha, she said, her hands shaking around her mug. Honestly, if you were not living downstairs, half of us would have moved out months ago. That fancy management company Horizon Gate hired. They are ghosts. They never fix anything. I stared at her. They do not answer. Never, Carla said. But they sure are quick to cash the rent checks, and raising it by 10% every renewal. Something clicked in my chest. A cold, hard gear turning. The next day, I took the bus to the community legal clinic at St. Jude's Church. It was a free service for seniors. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, a retired corporate lawyer with coffee stains on his tie and eyes that missed nothing. I laid out everything: the asset protection agreement, the letters, the original operating agreement I had hidden. He read in silence for 20 minutes. Then he started to chuckle. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Mrs. Ellison, do you think you signed your life away?" he asked, looking over his spectacles. "They told me I have no rights. They said I am just a dependent." I stammered. "Well, they lied," Mr. Henderson said, tapping a paragraph on the 3rd page of the document Lucas had made me sign. "This agreement uses your building as collateral for a line of credit. Yes. But look here. It says the collateral pledge is valid only so long as the managing member remains unchanged. And who is the managing member according to your original operating agreement, me?" I whispered. "Exactly," he said. "You are the linchpin. They cannot sell it. They cannot transfer it. They cannot even refinance it again without your signature. You are not a guest in your own company. Martha, you are the boss." He leaned forward. "Here is my advice. Open a new business account. Today. Send a notice to all your tenants to direct deposit rent there. Cut off the Horizon Gate account. You have the right to self-manage." I did exactly that. When I got access to the full rent roll from the tenants to set up the new deposits, I felt the air leave my lungs. For years, Lucas had been sending me reports showing that Redwood Place was barely breaking even, generating maybe $3,000 a month in profit after expenses. I looked at the real numbers. The rents were nearly double what he had told me. The maintenance fees he deducted were for a management company that never answered the phone. He had been skimming thousands of dollars every single month, using my building as his personal piggy bank while telling me I was a financial drain. I sat at my small kitchen table, the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop screen. I did not cry. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, iron resolve. "Okay, Lucas," I said to the empty room. "You want me to be a stranger, I will be a stranger. But I will be a stranger who signs her own checks." I enrolled in a free property management workshop at the community center, sitting in a plastic chair between a retired schoolteacher named Bill and a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who owned a duplex. For the first time in years, I wasn't the charity case mother. I was a student. I learned about depreciation schedules, cap rates, and the magic of cash-on-cash return. I realized that what Lucas called high finance was just fancy vocabulary for common sense. That is where I met Diego. He was a real estate broker in his late 30s with a sharp haircut and an even sharper mind. He came to inspect Redwood Place one afternoon, tapping on the brickwork. "Mrs. Ellison," respectfully. "You are sitting on a gold mine," Diego said, looking at the high ceilings of the lobby. "But you are marketing it like it is 1995. You don't need to be the cheapest place in town. You need to be the place with soul. The remote workers, the tech kids. They crave character." "Character?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean old pipes and drafty windows?" Diego laughed. "No, I mean exposed brick, fiber optic internet, and a story." "Let's polish this gem." I took a risk. I used my clean credit, which Lucas had no part of, to secure a small renovation loan. I didn't gut the place like Brooke wanted. I restored it. We sandblasted the facade to reveal the original red brick. I installed high-speed internet that could run a spaceship. I commissioned a local artist to paint a mural of native wildflowers on the side wall facing the street. Suddenly, Redwood Place wasn't just an old building. It was vintage cool. The transformation attracted Blue Peak Supply, a logistics startup looking for a satellite office. Two young men in hoodies walked in, looked at the exposed beams in the ground floor commercial space, and offered to sign a 5-year lease on the spot. This vibe is exactly right for our brand. One of them told me, it feels authentic. That lease changed everything. It stabilized my cash flow in a way that allowed me to breathe. Diego then introduced me to a private investment group of independent landlords. We met once a month at a diner. They taught me how to use digital property management software on my iPad. I learned to screen tenants, sign electronic leases, and raise rents to market rates without being heartless. You are a natural at this. Martha, a landlord named Sarah, told me over coffee. You actually listen to people. That is rare in this business. Through this group, an opportunity came up. A warehouse district on the outskirts of town was being redeveloped, and a partner was looking to sell his share in a logistics facility leased to an e-commerce giant. It was a stretch, but I saw the numbers. Online shopping wasn't going away. I used the equity in Redwood Place, my equity, to buy into the warehouse deal. This time, I read every single line of the contract. I understood the exit strategy. I knew the risks. And most importantly, my signature was the only one on the paper. Blue Peak Supply exploded in growth. Within 3 years, they were acquired by a national conglomerate. My commercial space was suddenly housing a division of a Fortune 500 company, and the value of Redwood Place skyrocketed. Simultaneously, the warehouse investment started paying out quarterly distributions that made my old monthly allowance from Lucas look like pocket change. I went back to Mr. Henderson, the lawyer at the church clinic. I need to protect this, I told him. Not for me, but for the future. We set up the Ellison Living Trust. We moved the title of Redwood Place and the warehouse shares into it. I was the sole trustee. I was the sole beneficiary. And on the page for the successor beneficiary, the person who would inherit it all if I passed, I did not write Lucas's name. I wrote Emma Ellison. By the time I turned 62, the bank appraisal came in for the trust's assets. I sat in my new, sun-drenched condo in the city centre, a place I bought for myself, separate from the business, and looked at the number. The total value was over $8 million. I was a multimillionaire. But I still clipped coupons for the grocery store. I still drove my reliable sedan. And I kept Redwood Place running like a well-oiled machine. To the outside world, I was just a quiet, retired woman. To Lucas, I was still the poor mother he had ghosted. He had no idea that while he was chasing headlines, I had built a fortress. And the best part was, I didn't owe him a dime of it. While my bank account quietly grew into the millions, my son was busy shouting his success from the rooftops. I would sit in my sunroom with a cup of tea and listen to him on popular finance podcasts. He spun a compelling narrative. He told the hosts he had risen from a blue-collar wasteland, a rusted world of poverty that he had escaped through sheer grit. He never mentioned the tuition checks I wrote. He never mentioned the nights I spent scrubbing floors to buy his textbooks. He called himself a self-made man, posting photos of his white Tesla and his family vacations to the Maldives with the caption "Breaking the Cycle." It was a cruel hashtag. To him, my husband and I were just a cycle of failure he had to break. But the facade of the rich is often thinner than the drywall in a cheap motel. Late one night, scrolling through financial news, I saw a headline that made my stomach turn. Horizon Gate Capital was being investigated for opaque fee structures and a failed merger that had cost investors millions. The article mentioned liquidity issues and aggressive leveraging. I knew that language. I knew what it meant. It meant the house of cards was shaking in the wind. 2 days later, my phone rang. The screen said Lucas. It was the first time in 3 years. "Mom, hi." It's me, Lucas said. His voice was too bright, too loud. I know it has been a while. Work has been insane. You know how it is. I know how it is, I said, my voice steady. He skirted around the edges for a minute before he dropped the bait. So, I was thinking about you the other day. How is the old apartment? You didn't sell Redwood Place, did you, I mean? With the market being so high, I figured you might have cashed out. I gripped the phone tighter. He was fishing. The building is fine. Lucas, I said. I am still the managing member. I like to keep busy. There was a silence on the other end that lasted 5 seconds too long. He had assumed I would have sold it for scraps years ago to pay for my medication. Right. Good. That is great. Mom. He stammered. A week later, I slipped on a patch of oil in the grocery store parking lot. It was a foolish, clumsy fall that left me with a gash on my forehead requiring 5 stitches. I did not call Lucas, but the hospital found his name as my emergency contact from an old file. They arrived within the hour. Brooke rushed into the emergency room wearing designer yoga pants and a look of terrified concern that seemed rehearsed for a camera crew. Oh. Martha. Oh my God. Are you okay? Brooke cried, rushing to my bedside while the nurse adjusted my bandage. We were so worried. How could this happen? Lucas stood by the door. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had not slept in a month. Beside him stood Emma. My granddaughter was a teenager now, tall and gangly. She looked at me not with love, but with a strange, detached curiosity, as if I were an exhibit in a museum she had been told to avoid. I am fine, I said, sitting up. It is just a scratch. It is not just a scratch. Mom, Lucas said, stepping forward. You are living alone. You are getting older. This is a sign. Brooke nodded vigorously. Lucas is right. We have the space. The downstairs guest suite is completely private. You should come stay with us. Just until you are back on your feet. We want to take care of you. I looked at them. I saw the desperation in Lucas's eyes, masked as filial piety. I saw the calculation in Brooke's smile, but I also saw the empty apartment waiting for me, and the undeniable ache in my bones. Loneliness is a powerful poison. It can make you drink from a cup you know is tainted. Okay, I said, for a little while. When I packed my things the next day, I did not take much clothes, but I went to my wall safe and took out the black leather briefcase. Inside was the Ellison Living Trust documents, the deed to Redwood Place, and the original operating agreement. When I walked into their foyer carrying that briefcase, the air in the room shifted. Lucas's eyes dropped instantly to the leather case in my hand. Brooke stopped mid-sentence. Here, let me take that for you. Mom, Lucas said, reaching for the handle. It looks heavy. I pulled it back, holding it tight against my chest. I have it, I said. It is just personal papers. Old things. Lucas pulled his hand back, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before he smoothed it over with a smile. Sure. Of course. Just make yourself at home. As I walked down the hallway to the guest suite, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I was not a guest here. I was prey. And they had no idea that the prey had brought her own ammunition. Life in the villa settled into a rhythm that felt less like family and more like servitude. Within a week, the pretense of me being a guest evaporated. I became the unpaid house manager. I drove the SUV to pick Emma up from her private school at 3 o'clock because Brooke was too busy with strategy calls. I accepted the endless stream of Amazon boxes that piled up on the porch like a cardboard barricade. I cooked pot roast and mashed potatoes for dinner, sweating over the stove, only to check my phone and see Brooke posting a photo of a salad from a high-end bistro with the caption, "Fueling up after a marathon meeting day." She was upstairs in her office the whole time. One afternoon, I returned from the school run to find Brooke in my guest suite. She had the closet doors thrown open and a black trash bag on the bed. My heart hammered against my ribs when I saw the sleeve of Jack's old grey cable-knit sweater sticking out of the bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, dropping my keys. Brooke didn't even flinch. She continued folding a cashmere throw. "Oh, Martha, I was just doing a little edit. This room has such bad feng shui with all this heavy fabric. It smells like mothballs and dust." I walked over and pulled the sweater out of the bag. It smelled like Old Spice and diesel, the scent of the man who had loved me. "It smells like my husband," I said, my voice shaking. Brooke sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "Martha, we are trying to elevate the energy here. This house is not a museum for your past. Sad memories. You need to let go if you want to vibrate at a higher frequency." I did not argue. I simply took the sweater and locked it in my suitcase. But the real violation happened 2 nights later. I was in the kitchen getting a glass of water around midnight. The house was silent, or so I thought. Then I heard raised voices coming from the master bedroom upstairs. The ventilation vents carried the sound down like a conduit. "We are bleeding." Brooke Lucas's voice was a harsh whisper, cracking with panic. "The Horizon Gate audit is going to expose the leverage ratio. We are underwater by $3 million. If the investors find out..." "Lower your voice," Brooke hissed. "Just get her to sign the consolidation. The trust has assets, right? That old building is worth something now. She is stubborn." Lucas groaned. "She acts like she knows something. She knows nothing." Brooke snapped. "She is a lonely old woman. Scaring her is easy. Tell her the government will take it all in taxes if she dies. If she does not sign, we are done. Lucas, we lose the house. We lose everything." I stood in the dark kitchen, the cold glass of water pressing against my palm. The invitation to move in, the concern about my fall, the sudden warmth, it was all a lie. They were not here to care for me. They were here to harvest me. The psychological warfare intensified. At dinner the next evening, Brooke poured wine for herself and Lucas, skipping me. "So, Emma," Brooke said, smiling at her daughter. I was thinking, calling Martha Grandma is so formal, and you already have Nana and Gram on my side. Maybe just call her Grandma M, or even just M. She looked at me with dead eyes. "Honestly, Emma has enough grandmothers already. Another one is a bit redundant. Don't you think?" Emma looked down at her plate, pushing a piece of broccoli around. She refused to meet my eyes. I realized then that my granddaughter was not just a teenager. She was a hostage to their narrative. They had painted me as a burden for so long that she was afraid to show me affection. "Grandma is fine," I said quietly. 2 days later, the trap was sprung. Lucas came home early with a man in a pinstripe suit. He introduced him as Mr. Sterling, a senior family wealth strategist. We sat in the living room, the air conditioning humming too loudly. "Mom, Mr. Sterling has designed a structure called the Ellison Family Office, Lucas said, placing a fresh binder on the coffee table. It is brilliant. It protects you from estate taxes and ensures that if your health declines, the assets are safe. Mr. Sterling opened the binder. He spoke in a rapid, practiced cadence, using words meant to terrify a senior citizen. Mrs. Ellison. Without this structure, the probate courts could tie up your estate for years, Sterling said, sliding a pen toward me. The government could take 40%. This transfer assigns the trustee duties to Lucas, strictly for administrative efficiency. I put on my reading glasses. I ignored his finger pointing at the signature line and turned the page. I read the fine print in section 14. In the event of the grantor's incapacity, defined herein as a determination by the acting trustee, all control shall immediately vest in the successor trustee. Lucas was the successor trustee. And if I signed this, Lucas would be the one deciding if I was incapacitated. All he would need to do is say I was senile, and he would have the keys to Redwood Place, the warehouse shares, and the $8 million in equity I had built. Mum, it is just standard boilerplate, Lucas said, leaning forward, sweat beading on his upper lip. Why are you hesitating? Do you want the government to take everything Dad worked for? Looked at him. He used Jack's name. He dared to use Jack's name to steal the very thing Jack had told me to keep. I closed the binder. My hand drifted to my lap, where I was clutching my own black briefcase, the one containing the real power. The storm was here. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the thunder. I need to think about it, I said. There is no time to think, Lucas snapped, his mask slipping. The fiscal year ends in 2 days. If you don't sign this, you are hurting the family. I stood up, holding my briefcase tight against my chest. I am the family. Lucas. I said softly, and I will sleep on it. That night, I spread the papers across the small desk in the guest suite. I laid out the operating agreement from 15 years ago, the original trust deed, and the recent valuation report Lucas had carelessly provided. I cross-referenced them, line by line, under the dim light of the desk lamp. That was when I saw it. The gap. The gaping hole in Lucas's arrogant calculations. Lucas had valued my share of the warehouse district based on data from 2 years ago. He did not know that Blue Peak Supply, the tenant occupying the warehouse, had been acquired by a global logistics giant last month. I knew because I read the trade journals every morning. He did not read them because he was too busy trying to save his own sinking ship. He thought my share was worth maybe $500,000. In reality, with the new lease terms and the acquisition premium, that single asset was worth over $7 million. Combined with the equity in Redwood Place, I was holding the keys to $8 million he had completely forgotten about. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Henderson at his home. It was late, but he answered on the second ring. It is bigger than we thought, I said. You are in the driver's seat. Martha, Mr. Henderson said, his voice crackling over the line. You are the trustee. You are the managing member. Legally, you are the only person who matters. They are the ones standing on the cliff. The next morning, while Brooke was busy screaming at the pool cleaner outside, I logged into my online banking. I opened a new high-yield business account at a completely different bank, one that Horizon Gate had no relationship with 3 clicks. I redirected the rent deposits from Redwood Place and the quarterly distribution checks from the warehouse partnership into this new fortress. I changed the passwords. I revoked the view-only access I had given Lucas years ago. Then I made the call that would seal the deal. I contacted a regional real estate investment firm, a direct competitor of Horizon Gate. I spoke to their acquisitions director, a woman I had met briefly at a seminar. I am looking to sell 49% of Redwood Place and 50% of my warehouse holdings. I told her. I keep majority control. I stay on as an honorary advisor. But I want the cash payout immediately. They knew the value. They agreed to a valuation that put my payout at exactly $8 million. The paperwork was drafted and sent to my secure email within hours. Downstairs. The pressure campaign continued. Brooke cornered me in the laundry room, her face twisted in a mask of faux concern. "Martha, really? You are being irrational," she said, leaning against the dryer. "You do not trust your own son, but you trust these dusty old papers? Do you want to die alone in that shabby apartment? We are offering you a permanent home. We are family." I am just confused by the legal words. "Brooke," I said, widening my eyes behind my glasses. "It is all so complicated." I played the same game with Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, later that afternoon via video call. I asked him the same question 3 times, making my voice wobble. "So, Mr. Sterling, just so I understand. If I do not sign this document, the trust stays exactly as it is, eh?" Sterling sighed, clearly annoyed by my stupidity. "Technically, yes, Mrs. Ellison. Without your signature, the current structure remains. But that leaves you vulnerable to thank you." I interrupted. That is all I needed to know. I hung up the video call and turned around to find Emma standing in the doorway. She was holding her iPad, looking at me with a frown. She had heard me on the phone with the investment firm earlier. She had seen the spreadsheets on my screen. "Grandma," she asked, "why were you talking about millions of dollars? Dad says you are broke." I motioned for her to come closer. I decided then and there to break the cycle of lies. I turned my laptop screen toward her. I showed her the deed. I showed her the revenue chart of Redwood Place. I showed her the pending wire transfer for $8 million. "People have told you your whole life that I do not own anything," I said, looking her in the eye. "But the truth is, Emma, I own the assets that pay for this house. I own the company that your dad is trying to take. I am not broke. I am the bank." Emma's eyes went wide. She looked from the screen to me. The pity that had been in her eyes for weeks vanished, replaced by a sudden, dawning respect. She realized that the old woman in the guest room was not a charity case. She was a titan in a cardigan. You built this," she whispered. "I did," I said, closing the laptop. "And tomorrow, I am taking it back." The morning sun sliced through the windows of the kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but the atmosphere around the marble island was cold enough to freeze water. Mr. Sterling, the financial advisor who was really just a glorified shark for Horizon Gate, sat with his pen hovering over the paperwork. Brooke shoved the stack of documents toward me with a force that made them slide across the polished stone. "We need this signed today." "Martha," Brooke said, her voice tight with a panic she was trying desperately to hide. "The market is showing signs of a correction. If we do not restructure the asset protection plan before the closing bell, we lose the tax advantage. Just sign the damn line." I looked at Lucas. He was leaning against the counter, rubbing his temples. He looked like a man whose world was crumbling, because it was. He knew the investigators were closing in. He knew his liquidity was gone. "Mom, please," Lucas said, his voice cracking. "I am carrying this whole house. I am carrying this family. You do not understand the complexity of what is happening. Just sign it, and everything will be fine. I promise." I picked up the pen, but I did not lower it to the paper. Instead, I flipped to the back page, pretending to study the indemnity clause. "I am still worried about this transfer of control," I said slowly. "It says here, I give up all rights to—" "Oh my God, stop it." Brooke slammed her hand on the counter, making the coffee cups rattle. "You are acting like you have something to lose. You are a dependent." "Shmartha, you do not own anything important. You are just holding up the process for attention." Lucas looked at me, his eyes bloodshot and wild. The stress broke him. He pointed a shaking finger at my face. "She is right, Mum. You have to stop acting like you own anything in this life. You have nothing. Just sign the paper." The shout echoed off the high ceilings. The refrigerator hummed in the sudden, dead silence. I saw movement on the stairs. It was Emma. She was sitting halfway down, hugging her knees, watching her father scream at his mother. I placed the pen down on the marble. I did not sign. Instead, I reached down and picked up my battered black briefcase. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my skirt. "It is funny you say that. Lucas," I said, my voice calm and steady, because I finally learned how to read the small print. "And since you were so insistent that I do not own anything, I decided to liquidate what little I had left to clear my name from your mess." I pulled out a single sheet of paper, a bank confirmation receipt, and laid it on top of their unsigned contract. "I sold 49% of Redwood Place and my entire stake in the warehouse partnership yesterday afternoon," I said. "The wire transfer cleared this morning. $8 million is now sitting in the new Ellison Living Trust account. And my name is the only one on it, not yours." Mr. Sterling choked on his coffee. He snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the numbers. You sold the underlying assets," Sterling stammered. "But the collateralization is void." I finished for him. I called my old lawyer. He reminded me that the operating agreement required the managing member's signature for any liens. I never gave it. So, I sold my property. It is all legal. I did exactly what you asked. Lucas, I stopped acting like I owned your problems. I handled my own business." Brooke let out a screech that sounded like tearing metal. "You traitor, we will sue you. That money belongs to the family estate. We will take you to court for every cent, Mr. Sterling slowly lowered the paper. He looked at Lucas, then at Brooke, and shook his head. "We have no case, Mrs. Ellison," Sterling said, his voice devoid of hope. The title was in her name. The LLC was hers. She had the right to sell. If we try to sue, the court will see that we tried to leverage assets we did not own. If there is any fraud here, it is on us." The color drained from Lucas's face. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He realized, finally, that the safety net he thought he had was gone. I picked up my briefcase and my small suitcase that I had packed that morning. I walked around the island and stopped in front of my son. "You told me to stop acting like I own anything." I said, "Okay, I accept that. From this moment on, I do not own you. I do not own the responsibility to save you from your own greed. And I certainly do not own the obligation to forgive you. I am taking what is actually mine. And I am leaving. I turned and walked toward the front door. I heard Brooke sobbing, a ragged, ugly sound. Lucas was silent. As I reached the foyer, soft footsteps ran up behind me. I turned to see Emma. She didn't look at her parents. She looked at me, her eyes clear and fierce. She threw her arms around my waist, burying her face in my shoulder. "Grandma, I will find you," she whispered. "I promise." "I know you will," I said, kissing the top of her head. "I will be waiting." I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the bright, blinding sunlight. I did not look back at the mansion. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I left behind a son who thought he owned the world, but owned nothing, while I drove toward a future that was finally, completely, mine. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary for more stories like this. And smash that hype button to help this video get recommended to more people.